Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2023 Global DEI Conference, a transformative platform for diversity, equity, and inclusion, presented by Ludo and powered by the One Business World platform. Thank you for joining us here for our dynamic convergence of global thought leaders and change makers as we foster equity and shape the future together. We're now pleased to welcome to our conference for our next segment, the Chief Diversity Officer of Excelsior University, joining us from Albany, Daniel Pascoe Aguilar, and his topic today is a framework for organizational intercultural development. Daniel, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We look forward to your presentation and your talk. Let me hand it off over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Glenn, and Stelios, and with everyone else. It is an honor to participate in this conference. Well, I am here to talk to you about what I call a JEDI framework, or a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion framework for your team or organization's intercultural development. And before I begin to talk about the framework, let me just say a few words about me and Excelsior, and then give you a little bit of context about where this falls in the agenda that we have at Excelsior University, and that you could potentially emulate at your team or at your organization. So I'm Daniel Pascoe Aguilar. I right now serve at Excelsior University. I have been in higher education now for 22 years in the spaces of career and professional development and of DEI and JEDI. But I truly believe that it is we are in charge of one of the most important societal endeavors, and that is preparing our next generation of leaders. And that a very important aspect of that is to make sure that our next generation of leaders is diverse, is authentic, engaged, and ready. And that, to some extent, given the challenges that we're facing right now at a national and global level, our ability to survive and thrive probably depends on how well we collaborate with our next generation to be ready for the challenges that they're already facing. Now, to give you context about the framework, let me make sure that this is working. There we go. I joined Excelsior University 2 years ago, and the way in which we decided to begin our agenda, this was a new position, a new role. We decided to start a Center for Social Justice. So we wanted to develop an agenda that was inclusive and that was comprehensive or systemic. So we did a listening tour, and we did over 40 focus groups, and we met with over 400 students, faculty, staff, and alums. And we identified all the levels at which we need to do our work. So we talked about all different aspects of what needed to be addressed, of the potential that we had, of the opportunities that we wanted to pursue, the needs that needed to be, to which we needed to respond. And we decided to define social justice to get started. And we landed on our fundamental belief that all people have the right to pursue economic, social, educational, and professional opportunity and meaning in their lives. That there is a shared responsibility to ensure that nothing stands in the way of that pursuit, and that this work stands on the 4 principles of equity, access, participation, and human rights. A very powerful, comprehensive way of understanding social justice and what work we wanted to do. Then we started the formation of the Center for Social Justice, and we decided to define it as a community and institutional hub of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion spaces, opportunities, and resources. And basically what we do is we facilitate 3 things. One of the most important things we can be doing right now is to facilitate safe spaces, to lift the stories and the voices around us. Every story, every voice matters, not just as a good thing to do, but as a way in which we can gather our collective intelligence to do better as a society, as organizations, as teams, and therefore to engage in dialogue. Dialogue that is multi-perspective, dialogue that focuses on learning from differences. And I say that emphatically and very specifically. I think we're so prone to be afraid of difference that we have become so polarized to the extreme. And how much are we able and seeking the opportunity to dialogue about our differences, to learn about them, to grow from them? That to me is one of the most important things in which we should be investing, because that's something that needs to happen at leadership levels, nationally, internationally, organizationally, but it can also happen, and it needs to happen at an individual level. What can I do today to begin to make change? Is to begin to see differences as opportunities and to engage in dialogue to learn about them. The other one is to expand access to opportunities. Now, in our case, we are a higher education institution. So our focus is to expand access to post-secondary education. Let me give you one example with a couple of data. According to OECD, it takes a family nearly 5 generations to get out of poverty. Think of that, 5 generations of food insecurity, of housing insecurity, of inability to reach potential, right? And to access opportunity. Now, then you compare in the United States, according to the Department of Labor, someone who earns a bachelor's degree in this country, as soon as they get the diploma, they enter a new bracket. They nearly double their wages, and they nearly drop their unemployment rate to half. I mean, talk about the transformative power of education, right? However, only 4.3% of people in poverty in the United States complete a college degree. So you look at the sequence of these data, you notice how we have, at least in higher education, we have a problem with a systemic lack of access to the transformative power of opportunity, right? And we need to do something about it. So expanding access to this is something very important to do. And in whatever focus your organization has, is how can you expand access to opportunity? And the third one is to stop the belief that we can do this on our own, that this is a competition process, or that this is about gaining a competitive advantage, or this is about us finding ways of working together and of finding the opportunity to capacitate each other to do better, right? And to figure out ways of bringing solutions to the challenges that we're facing. So those are the 3 things on which the Center for Social Justice is focusing. You see here a graphic representation in the yellow, purple, and green, otherwise A, B, and C. You see the levels at which I was, or the areas on which I was describing. And then you have the blue, the D, which is what we're doing specifically. It's a version of C, but for Excelsior University. We're trying to help Excelsior University develop interculturally through our work. Now, let me show you an example, just one example of one area. You see here at the top the rope teams in developing safe spaces. Keep in mind that Excelsior University is an online institution. We serve students not only virtually, we also serve them asynchronously, meaning students don't have a campus. Students don't have the opportunity to walk and find a faculty member or a staff member or a group of students they join. Everything happens online, and it happens at their own time, place, and pace by design, right? To be as accessible as possible. So we have developed these rope teams, and I'm going to do a new share to help you see how these look like. It's a platform we have developed in an attempt to develop an on-campus, an online on-campus for our students. Notice that we have here what we call identity allyship rope teams, and then we have also career rope teams, so that we can develop what we call support villages around our students based on what matters to them, whether it is an industry they want to pursue, right, professionally, or whether it is an identity, right, that resonates with them. either because they identify or because they want to be partners and allies of. So let me give you an example. If we go to the race and ethnicity road team, you see that then we have curated content, imagery, and content of different types, all specific to race and ethnicity, from interactive opportunities to tell your story, recommend content, chat with others, ask questions or feedback, engage with others, other rope teams, whether identity or career, but then also events and blogs and support centers, all related to race and ethnicity, mentors and community connections with this focus. And then we have opportunities to engage in the community with volunteering and community engagement, internship and job databases specific to this. You have featured classes related to this, spotlights, videos, resources of different types, right, and other types of information. And for that purpose, we have similar rope teams, let's say, for gender and sexuality, right? You see the same distribution or structure of the page, but with different content, based on the particular rope team in which we're engaging. And then you have also, for example, if you go to health sciences, you see something similar, but it's now devoted specifically to a particular industry. This is all about health sciences. And this platform allows for users to customize their content so that then even you can go and begin to receive, at the frequency of your choice, an individualized newsletter with the content of your choice on any of the rope teams that interest you. So that's an example of how, at Excelsior University, we are developing. Here we go. How we're developing safe spaces. And for these rope teams, we're developing programming on a regular basis. A couple of weeks ago, we had a keynote speaker and a follow-up conversation about First Generation Day. This week, we have a keynote and a follow-up conversation on the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. And we have regular programming and interaction about these rope teams. Now, based on that, at Excelsior University, we have identified a strategic plan goal of becoming a multicultural organization. And that is based on the model by Jackson and Hardiman of the Multicultural Organization Development Model, which helps organizations to become an MCO, or a multicultural organization. And that means three things: attempting to be inclusive in everything that we do, every practice, every interaction, the design of every program, of every project, of all work that we do. But it also adds two layers that are often missed in organizations. The second one is contribution, to leverage the diversity of knowledge and perspectives, of ideas and skills around us to do better, to permeate in everything that we do so that we can perform at a higher level. And number three, to make sure that our impact is not only internal to our institution, but also external. And we're pursuing this through a number of different strategies. You can see here the model by Jackson and how it helps an organization move to the right to becoming a multicultural organization. These are the strategies that we are pursuing in order to attempt achieving becoming. And notice that it's becoming, not to become, because it's, according to the Jackson model, it's a perpetual process, right? You don't just check the box and you're done. So today I'm going to talk to you about one of these strategies, the Jedi Map framework that you see at the very right in the darker blue bubble in this chart. Now, this framework came about based on research, based on the listening tour, and also based on the logistics of how to prepare an organization to do all this work. Everything that I have shown you. How do we get ready to perform at this level, to focus on becoming a multicultural organization, to pursue social justice in everything that we do? And we identified the need for us to develop a framework and apply a framework that allows us to share a vision, and that allows us to share vocabulary and models and approaches and strategies that we can all individually and collectively pursue in a customized way based on where each of us is, but at the same time move in concert as an organization in our efforts. We're measuring our work through a maturity map and of course KPIs that correspond to each of them. And then I'll skip the examples for the sake of time on how we're applying that. So the Jedi map framework, as I was mentioning to you, is one sub goal of our strategic plan goal of becoming a multicultural organization. It has three components that are very important. Two of them are individual: mindset and approach. Mindset is the assumptions that we make in everything that we do, in our interactions and our work. Approach is what behavior we follow in order to do our work, right? So mindset, then approach is our behavior, and the third one is our procedures and policies. How do we elevate or scale our efforts in order to be structurally different, right? To grow in a way that is systemic. Let me talk to you about each of these levels. So mindset is how we challenge our assumptions. So we decided to use a model by Dr. Milton Bennett, who co-directs the Institute for Intercultural Development Research. And the name of the model is the Developmental Model for Intercultural Sensitivity. Very powerful. The first thing to mention about this model is that it defines intercultural sensitivity as our experience of difference. Any difference. We're not just talking about race. We're not just talking about gender. We're not just talking about the regular demographic constructs that we usually is any type of difference. And keep in mind, as John Powell talks about, we are designed to be afraid of difference, right? To other those we interact with. And how difficult is it sometimes for us to see the humanity in others and to help others see the humanity in us? Now, this model by Milton Bennett walks you through stages in our own intercultural sensitivity that go through from ethnocentrism to ethno-relativism. And it goes from denial, my reality, my perspective, my experience is the only one. There's no other, right? Then there's defense. There are other experiences, there are other perspectives, but they're all wrong. Mine is the only right one, so I need to defend mine. Minimization is, why are we talking about differences? We're all the same. The problem with that, though, is that I assume that others are like me. Acceptance is when I see other perspectives and other experiences, I don't do much with them, but I accept them. I see them without judgment. Adaptation is when I begin to grow and change based on the different experiences and perspectives around me. And integration is when I can go in and out of different perspectives and experiences, engage in interaction, dialogue, even let go of my perspective, let go of my experience to stand up for another one. So it's a powerful way in which we can identify where we are and move into a developed stage where we can grow interculturally. Now, the most powerful part of this model, in my perspective, is its premise. I had the opportunity to work with Dr. Bennett, and I asked him, how do you come about this model? And he said, it's a very simple observation, that as human beings, we have a tendency to see ourselves as highly complex individuals. That if you ask me who I am, I'm going to tell you about my family and our health and our finances and our education, careers, and everything that gets me excited and keeps me up at night. He said, unfortunately, the observation continues by noticing that as human beings, we also have the tendency to perceive or see others' experiences and perspectives as less complex than ours. And that the more different they are, or the more difficult they are for us to understand, the less complex we tend to see them. So the challenge here is, can we assume the same level of complexity in others' experiences and perspectives than the one that we assume in ours? And here's where the rubber meets the road. There are many experiences, there are many perspectives I will never have the capacity to understand, because I have not walked those shoes. Actually, It is disrespectful for me to try to understand them. That doesn't mean that I cannot learn from them, grow from them, and do everything in my power to develop equity and social justice in my environment. So based on that premise, I think that reframing our mindset requires us to think of interacting with others and do our work assuming that there are experiences and perspectives other than ours. That different experiences and perspectives are not wrong. That others' experiences and perspectives are as complex as ours. That we might never be able to fully understand an experience or perspective different to ours. That we must respect others' experiences and perspectives regardless of our ability to understand them. And that we must seek our growth as individuals, teams, or organizations based on the different experiences, perspectives with which we interact. This is very important, and this is something that we all can do individually. When we're out and about in the community, when we are in our work, when we're interacting with our clients or students, when we are making assumptions in our head, right? When we're reflecting on the world around us and everything that's happening that at least is overwhelming me often. Now, once we challenge our assumptions, it's time for us to think of that challenge as a way in which we can begin to adjust our behavior. How do we change our approach to interactions and to thinking and to our work? Keep in mind that modifying our behavior is not just a good thing to do. It is also an opportunity to bring return investment to our teams and our organizations. Let me give you an example. Catalyst did research that to me, was groundbreaking. They looked at hundreds of research studies and developed a meta-study with 138 that identified the following themes. Valuing and leveraging diversity helps teams and organizations enhance their talent, their recruitment, and their retention, their innovation and group performance, their financial performance, and their reputation and responsibility. So this is not just one study. This is a meta-study of hundreds of studies that identifies these themes. And I would imagine that there are not many leaders of organizations and teams that don't care about these themes, right? These are the bread and butter of what we do, whether in higher education or beyond. So the modification of the behavior can be done, and this is the approach, the model that we decided to bring to the framework, is Casmer's model, Fred Casmer, on developing third cultures. And it's a very basic premise, very related to the work of Milton Bennett in the DMIS that I just shared with you, that when we interact with someone else, we must assume that that other person has a different culture than mine. And that therefore, for us to work in a way that is inclusive and equitable, respectful, and that brings justice, right, that actually harnesses our collective intelligence, we must devote time to learn about what matters, what's most important to that culture. We often are so busy that we think that we have no time. We would see it as a loss of time if we use part of our meeting to learn about each other. Well, what I'm trying to tell you is that according to these models and approaches and research, it is a return on investment opportunity. Because what is the purpose of me collaborating with someone else who doesn't speak their mind because we haven't created the right environment? So why not I just do my work on my own, right? So it's an opportunity for us to leverage those ideas and skills and perspectives and experiences in a way that helps us do better. And for that purpose, therefore, we learn from each other as an opportunity to do better and develop a third culture, which would be in the form of values, expectations, communication guidelines, communication ground rules, collaboration standards, whatever you want to call them, but a way in which we ask the questions, what matters to you and what do you need in this space to show up authentically, to be who you are, to speak your mind and help us include your intelligence in the work that we do. Now, keep in mind that when we talk about our cultures, we have a lot of complexity behind them. these are the dimensions of identity that we usually operate and discuss and see in demographic breakdowns, and through which we are sometimes identified or we ourselves identify. If each of us were to write a paper about what each of these means to us, which are more salient and what is their meaning in our experiences, we would have long papers, and all papers will look very different. And it's not only the dimensions, it's also the intersectionality across them. Abe Johnson McKeown did a fantastic job in their research in identifying that all these dimensions of identity for each of us are constantly moving, they're dynamic, they're constantly interacting with each other. They all have different levels of awareness or salience with those dots that you see at different moments under different circumstances. And beyond that, in the center, there is an identity core through which we identify ourselves in a very personal way beyond the social constructs that often define us. And then in addition to that, there are social influences that are coming our way, and we have a filter through which we negotiate those. So there's a lot of dynamism and interaction and complexity beyond what we say a culture, right? And how we're interacting and learning from each other. A quick example, probably the most basic example I have found, but nonetheless powerful for these ground rules or expectations or guidelines, is what the intergroup dialogue project has defined as the Lara or the Larry method. It's very easy to remember. Remember Lara or Larry. And even if you just focus on the first two items, the red and the green, listen to affirm. Just let that sink in. Listen to affirm. How often are we listening to think how I'm going to respond? Or am I listening to figure out how I'm going to convince the group that my perspective is the right one, or to criticize the perspective of the one who's speaking, right? Or I'm just distracted thinking of what I'm going to do at the end of the day. But listening to affirm requires me to listen to learn so that I can paraphrase back what I heard. Imagine if that were the way in which we regularly interacted and we heard everyone, their perspective, their ideas, their skills, their experience, to affirm them, to include them, to leverage that intelligence, and then after that respond to what was said, not with a different thought, and then add or inquire. So that alone gives you an idea, right? Of course, you have gone through a number of other formats and guidelines and exercises that allow you to do this, but it's a very powerful opportunity for us to reframe how we interact with each other. The most basic example I can give is in your work environment or in your neighborhood, right? How often do we say, hey, how are you? Good. And you? Fine, thank you. And then we run where we're going. There was a speaker that recently said, stop and complicate it. No, I really meant, how are you? How are things going? Right? And then listen. Even do that at home, right? In a way that begins to open the lines of communication for the dialogue to flow and for the learning of differences to take place. Here's an exercise that I recommend that you take with you. So on your own, please think of someone at work, home, or your community with whom you interact or collaborate regularly, and reflect on the following. What would you share with them to help them learn more about what matters to you, both in your work overall and in your collaboration with them? What questions would you ask them to learn more about what matters to them in their work and their collaboration with you? Why do you do what you do? What inspires you? What do I not know that is important for me to keep in mind as we interact or do our work together? Are there attitudes or behaviors you would request from them for your collaboration and relationship to be more inclusive, equitable, and productive? What attitudes or behaviors would you be willing to change for your collaboration and relationship to be more inclusive, equitable, and productive? Jamie Washington suggests that one of the things that we do is always give context before sharing content. and for relationships, work relationships that have been difficult for me, I have brought that up. What if we always share context before we share content? To start with, this is why I'm sharing what I'm sharing, and this is what I'm hoping to get out of it. This is about how much time I think we should devote to it. Here it is. So how different it is if I'm saying, I need to vent. I'm really frustrated. I don't need you to do anything. Just listen for 5 minutes versus I need to find a solution for this, right? The problem of me jumping into solutions when they are wanting to vent, right, would be significant. So keep in mind, and if you could do this exercise on your own. And then, of course, we don't only operate one-on-one, right? We are constantly needing to scale our Jedi efforts. So we usually have a number of cultures at play. So culture A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So our work is to develop a collective culture. How do we do that? Right? How do we facilitate the dialogue to a level that allows everyone to show authentically, and to speak their mind so that we can actually leverage our collective intelligence? So based on the model that we're using in an effort of becoming a multicultural organization, there is an author that identified what she called, Kathy Aubert, multicultural organization indicators. And it's a very basic concept of identifying all the aspects of the work that you do on the ground. Here's an example list of how do you plan? How do you prepare people to do their work? How do you collaborate? How do you communicate? How do you develop culture? How do you evaluate your work? How do you market and promote what you do? And you can modify this list at will. And then identify the areas in which you think you are most in need of an enhancement of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. At Excelsior University, we decided to start with communication because we thought we first need to engage all of us in dialogue, leverage our diversity of perspectives. So let's start with communication. With a very basic exercise. Every unit at Excelsior is in the process. About half of them are done, of developing inclusive communication guidelines. This means they're asking every single member of the unit what they need for the environment to be inclusive and equitable to them, and offering them anonymous and asynchronous opportunities to share their thoughts, right? For them to be able to say, you know what, every time I speak, someone interrupts me, or I don't feel that people pay attention to what I say, or I would wish that we did this, or... And then we go through the process of develop. Here's an example of what we have developed at the Center for Social Justice, because we facilitate a lot of conversations. Areas of be present, share the air, speak your truth. And you've seen these processes, right? Be aware, focus on growth. But it's a very powerful example of we have to do this. We cannot assume that we understand what people need to be included and to feel that they can show up authentically. And it is a process that then allows for the communication to flow and to ensure, right, that we're not just making assumptions about what people need in order to be able to speak their mind. So keep in mind, there's an individual portion to the framework and there's a collective portion to the framework. First, he started with challenging our assumptions. Based on research and the conversations I've had with experts, they told me an effort never works from the bottom up alone or from the top down alone. You need both, particularly in cultural development and particularly intercultural development. So we need to challenge our individual assumptions. We need to believe, every member of the team and the organization needs to believe that this is important and there's a path for them to grow and to develop and to do better. Then we begin to modify our behavior together so that we can scale through policies and procedures, structures, even if you start as simple as beginning with the first annual application of the framework. For us is inclusive communication guidelines. Our second annual application is going to be the intercultural development inventory, right? So we're going to be stepping up every year to apply this framework in a way that allows us to develop structural opportunities for everyone to, in an incremental way, see a space for their voice, for their story, and for us to engage in dialogue to learn from each other in order for us to truly pursue this belief that all people have the right to economic, social, educational, professional opportunity and meaning in their lives, and that we all share a responsibility to make sure that nothing stands in the way of this pursuit. So Glenn, that's it. Thank you for the opportunity. I would be happy to entertain any comments or questions, if there are any.
Thank you, Daniel. I took so many notes, my pen is running out of ink. I mean, well, let's a couple things came in through the live stream. One was a thank you. Someone wanted to thank you for your use of the reframing slide. So kudos to you for that. And then a second question, or the initial question came in. You were speaking about safe spaces as an important part of that. The person's question was, of late they're seeing the use of the phrase brave space, and if you had any kind of thoughts or insights on one or the other, are they interchangeable? Would you take one over the other? Is it evolving to that? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very good question. I think it's a two-sided coin, because we always have to think of the presence of privilege and underprivilege in the spaces where we are, right? And we won't know that visibly. The people who are participating might not be aware of it either, right? But it's present and it's very strong. So if I say develop safe spaces, that's more difficult for someone who doesn't have as much privilege as others, or who lacks privilege, right? Because then they have already dealt with, I mean, you might have read the work of Geronimo on weathering, right? Or Chi Everett Sheldon on the bandwidth tax of uncertainty, and how tolling it is to have an oppressive experience for a long time. Asking someone in those circumstances to work on developing safe spaces is much harder than someone who has privilege. And that person needs to be brave, right? That's where the courage and the braveness comes in. But then you also flip that coin, and it's a lot easier for someone who has some level of privilege than to engage in a conversation. So we need to be conscious of that. We all need to be brave. One of the tenets that I hold every time I facilitate a conversation or engage in dialogue myself, or facilitate dialogue with others, is, can we enter this space assuming and believing that we all have the opportunity to grow here? Even if I am the instructor or the professor of a course, right? I'm approaching my students, and I approach thinking that I have the opportunity to learn and grow as much as my students. And in that way, we don't enter the space to figure out who's right, who's wrong, who knows, who doesn't know, who's practicing this, who's not practicing this, but rather, how can we learn? And it doesn't matter where we are. Can we meet everyone where each of us is and move the needle forward, even if just a little? Move the needle forward. And that requires braveness on everyone's part, and it requires all of us procuring a safe space.
Terrific. You spoke about, with your work with Milton Bennett on the mindset side, and that path from denial to integration. Someone mentioned in one of our earlier segments, and I've been doing some teaching the last couple of years, and your one of your charts reminded me of the Abe Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But when you look at your experience of difference there, as you move from denial to integration, how much flexibility does it have if people get stuck, or if they make progress and then they fall back? Is there room for that, or is it an absolute?
Oh, no. There's room for that, and it might happen on different aspects or different differences we encounter. For example, I might be more likely to to be more comfortable with differences that relate to my experience than to differences that are completely foreign to me, right? That make me immediately feel fear or surprise, right? But what's very important is to understand that the intercultural development process, or the development of intercultural sensitivity, is a journey, right? It's not just linear, right? There's a chance that we can move backwards at some point based on particular experiences that we have, that we can move forward significant, maybe 1-2 stages. But what's important is to understand that the process is not a finite one, right? Just like Jackson identified that becoming a multicultural organization or team, which is the 6th stage, is an aspirational stage. It's never completed. Same with integration. It's never completed, because we cannot think of JEDI or DEI as a checkbox that we complete and then we don't need to worry about it, right? That would be the antithesis of it. But it's rather an ongoing developmental process. So seeing it as a very flexible journey in which we engage to constantly try to see the opportunity to further integrate or to further adapt, or at the very least to further accept, right? Regardless of how challenging those differences are to our experience, to me is the goal. And giving grace to us, to others, right, to engage in that journey, to start where they are and to progress.
I like the word grace. That's a tremendous word. Also, patience. Not everybody's going to be on the same timetable for a journey. Sometimes that evolution is gonna be on different types of timetables. How patient do you find people? You talked about context before content. How patient do you find people to let you give that context?
It's usually something that needs reminding.
Okay.
So they might start and I say, "Can you please give me context before you?" I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to make sure that I am listening to you in the way that you need me to listen to you. What do you want out of this, and why are you sharing this with me before you share the content? Now, what I have found, though, is that when I do that, I have not yet found someone who gets upset about me asking them to add that information. They actually feel that I am more intentional in listening to them. And this is my own experience, but I have noticed that when I am really frustrated or angry or anxious or overwhelmed, the difference that it makes when someone listens to me, it is like magic, right? Yep. If they give me options, if they tell me, "I hear what you're saying, right? These are our circumstances. This is what we can do, right? Or this is the process." It changes everything. Versus if that's like encountered with lack of listening and even confrontation, that exacerbates the problem. So to me, I think it is a powerful mechanism to open the door for, "Hey, I'm listening and I want to do it well. Can you help me?"
Yeah.
It opens a very powerful door.
Well, your listen to affirm, respond, and then add/inquire model. I've been doing some teaching the last couple of years, and we spend a lot of time talking about active listening and having people not just waiting their turn to say what's on their mind, but to give that kind of feedback where you're coming back. And I've found in my own travels with this, as you actively listen and you listen to affirm and you give someone back that which they've said, or you say, here's what I heard, and then it's much more effective. And it leads to more constructive dialogue. It's not just a series of one-way signs, right? It's free-flowing traffic back and forth. And as we all know, in any kind of process, the feedback is so critical, right? And sometimes we have to go, you in the old days you used to draw flow charts, right? A lot of those flow charts had sometimes you had those lines that had to go back, and it's okay, we gotta go back and rethink this and start again, or start fresh, or pick it up from here. And I think that listening to a firm concept that you talked about from an intercultural dialogue standpoint
Powerful.
is very, 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 very powerful. And a couple last thoughts. 5 generations to get out of poverty. Wow. So, and as you said, educate. You get 2 initials after your name, BS or BA. Springboard, right? Game changer. Education is such, when you think about you think of the UN, right? And its sustainable development goals. Number 1 is, no more poverty, right? And how do you do that? You do that with education and sort of the great work you're doing at Excelsior there along those lines. But five generations, that's
it's mind-blowing, and it's so sad, right?
a long time. Yeah, to be
Well,
in that.
and what I think, Glenn, when I read those statistics, how much brilliance do we miss, right? Because people are brilliant. Those are people who they're forced to use their brilliance to survive, when they could be at the decision-making tables, helping us make decisions to solve the systemic challenges that we have. Obviously, we're not solving them right now, right? So it is that horrible scenario of us missing the collective intelligence that could help us survive and thrive, that those data help us see, and hopefully help us identify solutions to bridge them.
I wanted to tie in one last point before we say goodnight. My school, we're founded really on the whole concept of that first generation of learners, right? First generation to go to college, and you think about to become a first generation, or the next gen, right? The next generation of leaders. To get to the next generation of leaders, you have to have a first generation of leaders, right? And I know that first Gen Day was about 2 weeks ago. I don't know if Excelsior participated. We did. And I listened to the evening talk, and it was 4 incredible women from different backgrounds with different stories, doing amazing things in their organizations, including somebody from the Minnesota Twins. And it was just just amazing, and celebrating that and getting people to focus on that and all the promise that has. Is just you just hope people avail themselves of that. And those kinds of experiences and opportunities to listen, to talk to people, to learn from each other, all of the points, Daniel, that you were talking about, just incredible, just incredible.
Yeah, and it's just easy to see how giving people a voice can be such a learning opportunity for our ecosystem. And in higher education, I think it starts with our students. Like one of the examples that I give often is, I've done an insane amount of education, right? Like too much for the return on investment. How many courses of the hundreds of courses I've taken have asked me about my story? I can count them with the finger on my hands.
Yeah.
And I went to seminary, right? Which would be a place which, is likely to ask a lot about it. Well, of course, how can we say that we're meeting students where they are if we don't know their story? That's one thing. But how much intelligence we're missing, right, in our ability to do better as higher education institutions, let alone, this is the intelligence of our next generation of leaders, with whom we need to collaborate to identify the solutions for the crossroads we're beginning to face. So it's really an important focus of our work to figure out how to do it, including everyone, particularly those underrepresented around us.
One of our friends and one of our contributors here on the One Business World platform, he always talks about all the leadership opportunities that come from storytelling and listening to people's dialogue, and it's so important. And there's so many stories out there, and we don't want to miss them. And you should be counting on multiple hands, not just one hand. The amount of people that are otherwise asking for your story as well. Well, listen, Daniel, outstanding! What an incredible hour!
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you, Glenn.
here for the conference, and your slides were outstanding and just such an important topic. Congratulations on all your good work.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm honored.
We look forward to seeing you next time. Please stay in touch.
Likewise.
Thank
Same
you.
here.
Good night.
Bye.